Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, holistic health coach and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the exact location where optimal wellness lies. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, gut health, mental health, and more. I am so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Let's Eat. Today, we're going to be exploring a topic that kind of came to me last week in the form of content, and I shared on social media a little bit about this, but I wanted to take the opportunity to be a little bit more vulnerable and real about this topic because I think it's really important. And this topic has to do with, if I could go back and start my wellness journey again, what would I do? If I knew then what I know now, how would I have gone about it differently? And I don't mean this in the sense of, I would have eaten this more, or I would have done more of this exercise. It's more about my approach and my mentality to health that differs now in comparison to the way I saw health, if I saw health at all, right? Then, in my late teens, early 20s. And I think it's really important to share on this because I think going about it in this way offers you just a complete perspective shift and really just a complete mindset realignment in the way that you see health versus maybe the way diet culture tells us we should be looking at our health versus the way that our healthcare system says we should be looking at health. And I think that this is one of the most important parts, especially if you're interested in addressing root causes and looking at things a little bit more holistically. You have to be cognizant of how your pre-existing beliefs about health or the way that our culture deems, we should be approaching health, maybe through medication or this kind of one quick fix mentality, how that's in the driver's seat in how you proceed in taking care of yourself. I think nowadays I see so much of that infiltrate, especially with clients, where I'll be having conversations with them about certain supplements or certain foods, and there's a very narrow view on the fact that, okay, well, if I start taking this supplement, it'll all change, right? Or my gut will heal, or I'll lose weight, or my hormones will be balanced. And unfortunately, that's just not the case, and I don't think that anyone's at fault for that because number one, there's just miseducation and a lack of understanding about what it means to pursue your health in a more holistic way. And I think this is just simply a byproduct of growing up in our country. And so before taking those steps, I think there takes some realignment, rewiring, and it's almost like a muscle that needs to be exercised or needs to be strengthened for you to really be able to see your health in a well-rounded way. It can be hard to realign when we have been raised and exposed to a culture that is more, symptom focused and pharmaceutically based and so forth. And I know for me, it did take time to understand, okay, our organ systems are all connected, that we shouldn't be looking at them in isolation, and that the mind-body connection is real, and that, it does take the interconnectedness of nutrition and movement and sleep, and all of those influencing each other. They have a synergistic relationship in, just looking at it in a different way than the way we've been taught. And I think you could compare this to any cultural belief or norm that our culture, our society, maybe even your family system has deemed as normal. It does take time to start to see outside of that because that's the only lens that you've been offered. I'll give an example. My dad has always worked at night. He owns his own produce company. He's always gone to work at night. He sleeps in the afternoon and he goes to work at night. And he's retiring this year after many years, but that was always what I thought dads did. Like growing up, I was like, this is how dads work. They don't, take me to school in the morning, or they aren't around, in the evenings. They're sleeping. It was just part of my norm. And it's just pretty simple example, right? And maybe not a good one at that, but but you understand what I'm trying to say, where it's like we grow up in a space and everything that we do is just what is. And so it does take time for us to branch out from that and to see things in a different light, especially as it relates to health. And this is simply coming from my experience and what I've known to be true, because I think about how I saw my health, if I saw my health in any way, right? Over the course of 15, 20, say 25, almost 25 years of life, the way I approached it was much differently than how I see it now. And that was just a byproduct of being part of the American culture, being part of, being raised in a household that used medication and antibiotics and so forth, right? Being around a brother who was very sick and who was always in the hospital or at a doctor's visit, or, I was going to these doctor's visits. I remember we would go, I think I might have shared this on the first few episodes of my podcast, but we would go to McDonald's before we'd go to the hospital that my brother would go to regularly for lab work or appointments, and we'd always get the cinnamon buns that were from McDonald's. I remember those so clearly, going through the McDonald's drive-thru and getting one of those cinnamon buns that came in like the box. I remember that. And we'd go, my siblings and I would go. And I don't know what it was or why we didn't go to school, or I don't remember. But, what you're exposed to, how you're raised, those are the beliefs that you carry with you until you decide to believe otherwise. I think it's the same thing for religion. It's the same thing for religion. I grew up in a Christian household, and as you get older, you are able to maybe see other religions, or you realize that you don't align with the beliefs that are in the Bible, or, whatever the case is. And so there's varying degrees of this. There's varying degrees of, something as extreme as religion versus I thought all dads worked at night. Like, there's definitely a spectrum here, but I think as it relates to health, that's an important part of the puzzle. It's an important part of a journey, of any wellness journey. So to get started, I want to outline, there's 5 different focuses I'm gonna take here. I'm gonna spend some time on exploring. The first one being, you have to recognize and accept that your wellness journey never ends. Now, you can be working towards a certain goal. For example, right now, I'm working on my gallbladder health, my liver health, and I'm working with a practitioner to help support that. Alongside that, I'm also just working on full body health. I'm learning more about my gut health. I'm learning more about my mineral levels. I'm learning more about my hormones, right? There's a number of different areas that I'm spending time on. I'm investing time in order to feel better, in order to improve my health, in order to continue to prevent issues and so forth. And so there can be destinations embedded along the journey, or maybe stops along the journey. We won't call them destinations. But ultimately, this is a journey that never ends. And while that might feel a little bit daunting to some, I think that definitely comes across in some ways as feeling like, oh my God, I have to do this forever. This is forever. Now, initially, that can feel very daunting. Initially, that can feel very overwhelming, and I understand that. But I think it's probably a byproduct of the fact that we live in a culture that typically says, diets should be 8 weeks long, or, they should be just a certain amount of time in order to achieve a certain goal. I think I've been seeing a lot on social media that, being in their wellness era, in their wellness girly era, whatever that means. And, it promotes this belief that it is a minute period of time, or that it is a period of time that has a beginning and has an end. And there just has to be a reframe here, because yes, while you might not be actively working on something, for example, I will not always be working on my gallbladder health. I will probably integrate practices that will support my gallbladder now that I know I had this issue and I want to prevent it from happening again. I'm not going to always be on some sort of protocol to help support the gallbladder. And so obviously there's different ways of looking at this that can include a destination. However, a general wellness journey is something that is forever. because you're always investing in yourself. You're always improving. You're always seeking a greater quality of life. At least I'd imagine that if you're listening to this, that is the case, and maybe some of you don't feel that way, and that's okay. But I think the vast majority of us can agree that we want to feel good. We want to feel better. And so being on a wellness journey does include the acceptance that it is going to be forever, and life's going to throw different curveballs your way. There's going to be certain circumstances that require maybe more of an investment than other times. Sometimes it's just the maintenance. But the second that we can accept that it is ongoing and that it is, for the long term, the second that, number one, it takes some pressure off of it, I would imagine. I think we think, oh, I have 6 weeks, so I have to be perfect. I have to hit all my workouts. But when we think about how important it is for us to be flexible, how important it is for us to allow the ebbs and flows of life to happen, that's when we ditch that rigidity. I see this a lot with clients where, there is this all or nothing thinking that manifests, or there's this pressure that we put on ourselves to be perfect. I have to meet my calorie goal. I have to, get in all my workouts this week. And, when we really step away from that pressure, we step away from that structure, that rigidity, we realize that we can have trials and errors. We can have, moments where we experiment. Does this work? Does this not work? How is this habit going to most seamlessly integrate into my day? How am I going to make exercise work when my schedule looks like this? So this week I'm going to try it this way, and then next week I'll try it another way. Let's figure out, are certain days better than others for getting to the Pilates class that I want to go to? And if that's the case, and if I can only go Tuesdays at 6:30 a.m., which happens to be the time that I go to my Pilates class, then I'm going to go, right? And that's one day a week that you've now been able to say, this works effortlessly in my schedule. I feel good and I can do this. I can sustain this. Whereas there's other approaches that are so wonky and awkward and really inherently stressful, like trying to make it all work. And when we're able to really kind of abandon this mentality that it is for a limited time, we're able to go about it, I think, with more ease. And it becomes more organic and more embedded in our day-to-day, in our natural rhythm, as opposed to there's a concrete deadline that I have to keep my sights on and then I'm done, right? And don't get me wrong, I definitely think that there can be a lot of small goals throughout, right? But I also want to caution you in the rigidity that can come along with that and the toxicity that might evolve when we're so fixated on, I have to look a certain way by summer, or I have to do this, I have to do that. And the second that we're able to just make things seamless, where instead of just going hard in the gym March and April, you are cultivating a healthy relationship with exercise over the course of the whole year, and this is coming from experience, you feel good coming into March and April knowing I can just continue with what I've been doing. And there's really no need for me to adopt this more restrictive or put myself through more of an intensive exercise protocol or regimen or whatever the case is, simply for the fact that I'm trying to make up for lost time, or I'm trying to look a certain way by summer and so forth, right? So can you see the difference there when you look at your relationship with movement and so forth for the long term, and you really start in a space that says, all right, I'm going to start with the intention of doing this forever. You're not going to put yourself at risk for injury. You're not going to set the bar too high. You're going to meet yourself where you are, and you're going to say, I'm going to get to a point where I'm, consistently moving my body. I have a schedule that works for me, that feels good, that gives me adequate recovery, gives me adequate rest, and it's going to take time for me to cultivate that. And I think that's probably the biggest barrier that people have a hard time with, is accepting that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be something where you're able to just simply, take 4 weeks and suddenly you are, in the best shape of your entire life, right? It's not going to happen that way. And so as soon as you can move past that, it's a commitment for the long term, and that it's going to take some time for you to find your rhythm, to find what works, that is when you are on a journey that is going to be sustained, it's realistic, it is healthy, and you're going to have so much more success in that instead of fixating on a minute amount of time, instead of trying to jam-pack years of progress in a matter of a couple weeks, and so forth. So I'm hoping that this is coming across in a way that makes sense to you all. I think, the bottom message that I'm trying to make here, while I kind of went off on tangents a bit, is to recognize and accept that your wellness journey is ongoing and a wellness journey never ends. And so my hope is that it takes some pressure off of you to think that there has to be some sort of drastic change in just a couple weeks, but knowing that these habits, these skills, these routines, the second that they become the lifestyle that you're leading, the better quality of life that you're going to have, the closer to healing that you're going to get, and the less difficulty and resistance it will bring because it's a lifestyle, because it's part of your habits, part of your routines. And doesn't that just feel better? Like, I think that makes me feel better than that kind of claustrophobic, holding on for dear life, trying to force it all to happen, versus this is just who I am. And I hear that from clients all the time, is they seamlessly gravitate back towards their better nutrition habits after maybe they've had a weekend away, or, they've had a celebration of some kind, or, whatever the case is, because it's just part of who they are. It's part of their lifestyle. It's part of what they do. It's part of the person that they've become. So that is my biggest encouragement for you. Look at it for the long term. Change your mindset as it relates to accepting that it's ongoing. It's a journey that'll never end. And notice how that changes the way that you proceed. Secondly, if I could go back and start my wellness journey again, I would, drumroll please, prioritize my gut health, as it is the key to health. Hippocrates said all disease begins in the gut, and he was not kidding. He was not kidding. He knew what he was talking about. All disease really does begin in the gut, and imbalances, dysfunction, overgrowth, whatever the case is, all of that contributes to systemic inflammation, and inflammation is the root of all disease. So you can see how once we've adopted this more whole body approach, we can see how having issues with our gut health, which so many of us do, how that perpetuates inflammation within the body, and then that manifests as disease, as symptoms, and so forth, as dysfunction, and the list goes on. I myself navigated quite a turbulent relationship with antibiotics as a late teen, early 20-year-old. And even in my childhood and adolescence, it's not that I was really, it wasn't as extreme as it was when I was in my late teens and early 20s, but I certainly wasn't aware of gut health in my childhood or in my adolescence. So that obviously didn't help either. But what we know about antibiotic use, and especially when it comes to broad spectrum antibiotics, we know that they completely decimate the microbiome. And not only is it decimating and eradicating the issue, right, when we're trying to address a certain issue within the body, some sort of bad bacteria or pathogen or whatever it is, it does in fact do that, but then it also wipes away our good bacteria as well, otherwise known as our microbiome. And our microbiome is the community of gut bacteria that live in our gut lining, in our GI tract. And it's important for a number of reasons. I won't go too much into depth, but the fact of the matter is I was never given the proper education on why overuse of antibiotics is so harmful, what I was doing to my microbiome, why it was compromising my immunity and causing me to have a whole host of other issues, including really painful cystic acne, and what I should be doing in terms of aftercare, or even while I was taking the antibiotics, in order to minimize the damage and repair and restore my microbiome thereafter. I was simply just on my way, moving right through my, busy work and school schedule, getting sick again, reaching for the antibiotics, and moving right along. And the cycle continued. Now, if I could go back and tell my younger self to just look a little bit further in terms of how use of these medications were not operating in isolation, I think my journey would have unfolded so much differently than the way that it did. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm grateful for how things unfolded. I'm grateful to be where I am now. And I know that I wouldn't be here if I didn't go about my journey the way that I had. Okay. Everything happens for a reason. I really do believe that. However, the harm that I was doing to my gut health and the recurrent sicknesses and issues with my skin, and now knowing that my detox systems are out of whack, all of these factors were interrelated. And at the time, it really caused me a lot of distress. It really took a toll on my mental health. And I mean this in the sense that not only was I experiencing a lot of stress and low self-esteem and issues in that arena as a result of the symptoms I was having, but also we know that the gut and the brain are connected. And so whatever's happening in the gut is directly impacting the brain. It's directly impacting our mental health. And if our gut is in shambles, that's where a lot of our serotonin is made, where our dopamine is made. There's a lot of intricacy and there's a lot of connectedness between our mental health and our gut health. So I'm sure the anxiety or low mood that I was experiencing was not only a byproduct of how I was feeling about my skin and about my health, but also something was going on within the body that either exacerbated or caused that emotionality that was coming along with it. And it's all obviously very interrelated. So I'm not here to give you a lesson on gut health, but I am here to encourage you and to emphasize how important it is for us to spend time understanding our gut health, understanding the influence it has on other health conditions, understanding our history and relation to it, and simply just looking at our health and our health concerns and our symptoms through the lens of the gut. Because at the end of the day, that is so incredibly important, and we've just completely lost touch with that. We don't even consider that in our healthcare system. And we would have so much more authority and progress in our healing if we were to start there. So, moral of the story, the lesson, the takeaway here is whatever it is that you're experiencing, physical health, mental health, whatever the case may be, based on your specific circumstances, start in your gut. So number 3, if I could go back and start my wellness journey again, this is another lesson that I wish I had known. I would be willing to question our healthcare system and be a little bit more willing to do my own research based on my body, based on how I'm feeling, based on my needs and my symptoms, and really start to question, is there another way? Is this actually normal? Is it okay that I'm taking antibiotics as frequently as I am? Is it normal for me to be experiencing X, Y, and Z? And really do my due diligence based on what my body is telling me and start to look outside the box just a little bit. Now, I say this in retrospect, right? Because obviously at the time, what I was being told was what I thought was the only option, right? Of course, that's the case. When you are seeing a doctor, you assume they know best. They are going to suggest the best option for me. But if you start to adopt a different way of seeing your health, maybe through a more holistic, functional perspective, there are likely other ways of going about whatever it is that you're experiencing, right? And I don't want to overgeneralize it because that's not always the case, but it might not mean you need surgery. It might not mean that you need more antibiotics. At the time, yes, maybe, but then also questioning, why am I on antibiotics so frequently? Why is this happening? And what can I do to prevent this cycle from continuing? And I'm speaking from experience here. So I think, while the Western healthcare system, also Lulu is walking around right now with her toy, just doing circles, and you could probably hear her click-clacking on the floor. But while the Western medical system has saved my brother's life, and obviously other loved ones, and then personally with my own health and so forth, I am very grateful. And I always, always, always say this when I talk about our healthcare system, because I never want to come across as anything but I also feel very frustrated by this system because of how my health was looked at and the lens through which my health was addressed, just based on the fact that they don't operate the way that now I see my health, the way that I promote health in more of a holistic, whole body lens. So nothing against them. That's how the medical system works. That's how they're trained. They're pharmaceutically driven, right? Like I understand that's how it works. But for me personally, I feel the responsibility and I feel called to now empower others to not say, we should just abandon ship on our healthcare system, but we should also be willing to look outside of it if we are not able to get better, if we are still struggling, if we can't seem to find answers, if our blood work is coming back quote unquote normal and we're still not feeling right and our symptoms are there. I think it really does beg the need for us to look closer and to look elsewhere, because I think a lot of times we get that answer from the doctor, or, well, your blood work looks normal, or nothing looks abnormal, or whatever the case is. And then we say, okay, well, I guess I must be fine. And if you know in your body, if your body's saying to you, no, you're not fine, and you're having maybe these subclinical symptoms, or, whatever the case is, you have every right, and I would encourage you and empower you to look closer, look deeper, be willing to put in that work and that effort. Listen to your body. Your body is always communicating with you. If you haven't yet listened to my episode about listening to your body, 5 applications of the trendy wellness phrase, I think it's called. It's from a few weeks back. I would go take a listen. Go take a listen to that and see how that resonates with you. Because the concept, listen to your body, I know it's thrown around a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, what does that even mean? And I spend time exploring and expanding on different ways of looking at that phrase that really do allow you to better familiarize yourself with your body, with your symptoms, strengthen the relationship that you have with yourself, and hopefully it gives you another avenue to head down if in fact you get that answer from the doctor that says everything's normal. I want to say that's great to hear that everything's normal. I think that's probably the best thing we can hear, right? The last thing we want to hear is that there's something wrong, or, we found something, or whatever the case is, right? Obviously, I understand. However, at the same time, if you are still not feeling right and you're getting these answers that everything's normal, I would call into question, okay, how am I living my life, right? What does my nutrition look like? Am I moving my body? What's my quality of sleep looking like? Because sometimes, even though maybe our blood work falls within the normal range, obviously these habits make a big difference on how we feel from day to day. But then also look a little closer at your blood work, because when we look at blood work through conventional medicine lens versus maybe a more holistic lens, there are some disparities in terms of how a normal range is identified, and this is very relevant to thyroid numbers and getting a comprehensive thyroid panel. I don't want to go too far into this, but this is something that I feel very strongly about. Now, obviously, I'm not a medical practitioner. I don't offer blood work. I also have never been formally trained in blood work. I'm kind of doing my own research on this topic because I think it's really important, especially because a lot of clients get blood work and I look at it, right? So I want to better understand what I'm looking at. However, being able to self-advocate and being able to take that initiative and look further is something that I think we all need to be doing more of, because unfortunately, we're just not getting that in the healthcare system within our country. And that's really unfortunate. So that is my third lesson. If I could go back, I would do my own research. I would call into question the practices, the suggestions that I was given, especially around antibiotics and birth control and, surgery and all that. And I would take that step for the sake of my own healing. Any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. I really feel so strongly about this topic, and it's something that I obviously wish I knew, and it's something that I really empower clients with. And it's a very fine line for me to walk, because obviously when I work with clients, I have to be aware of my boundaries. I have to be aware of what I'm allowed to say, what I'm not allowed to say. And I really try to help support my clients and educate them about this topic, because I don't work maybe directly with their healthcare providers. If they wanted me to work with them, or if they wanted me to be in touch with them, I'd be happy to do that. However, they come to me with, oh, my doctor says this, my doctor says that, and I'm not in a position to call any medical advice or suggestion or guidance into question. That is not my position, and I'm making it very clear that that's not something that I feel called to do, or am I qualified to do. Okay, always make that clear to them, and obviously through this conversation that I'm having right now. However, I also like to offer insight on other ways of looking at the suggestion, or maybe the guidance that was given from a more holistic lens for the client to consider. Not to go do, not to boycott their doctor's advice, because like I said, that's not my role. But I can't sit by and not at least make a suggestion or say, maybe ask for this test too, or maybe consider if they can test, this alongside that, right? Just for us to expand their likelihood of getting answers, getting an understanding of what's going on. Because I think that is something that I can help clients do. And I've even, I have clients who say to me too, where they're like, you helped me really stand up for myself. You really helped me. I remember this conversation I just had a few weeks back with a client, you know who you are because I know that you're listening, who said, I feel like I can really step up and I can really, advocate for myself and kind of put my foot down to some extent and ask questions. And not just sit by and let them tell me once again, you just need to rest more, or you just need this, you just need that. For someone who has been going through an extensive history with the medical system. And if I can do my part in empowering clients in order to get to a place where they are healing, my work is done. That is exactly what I want. It's not to put up resistance. It's not to create this dissonance or create this conflict between my clients and their healthcare providers. But it's simply a level of self-advocacy that we all need to take into consideration, especially if we are navigating a health concern that really compromises our quality of life. None of us deserve that. None of us deserve that. And if we're not going to get the answers that we need, we have to be willing to take the road less traveled, essentially, and figure it out for ourselves. So I hope that you feel motivated. I hope that you feel empowered by this, because I will be your biggest hype woman and cheerleader in ensuring that you are getting the help that you need and asking for what you need, because a lot of times we're not seeing that offered, not because there's, negligence going on, not because doctors don't care. It's just the training, I think, in my personal opinion, how I see it, is very limited and it's very by the book. And, being willing to just look outside of maybe what's prescriptive in Western healthcare can actually be really, really helpful. My fourth lesson for you, if I could go back and start my wellness journey again, would be to acknowledge that nothing in health happens in isolation. We are a whole body. We are a whole body filled with organs that are all connected, systems that all communicate with each other. We are interconnected and nothing happens in isolation. How is one aspect influencing the next? Now, this does not require you to understand anatomy. This does not require you to have a medical or health background. But just by better understanding the fact that everything happens in tandem with everything else, you can start to see the bigger picture of your body. Now, I think from an early age, we learn that we're supposed to go see certain doctors for certain issues. We go to cardiologists for our heart. We go to gastroenterologists for gastro issues. We go to pulmonologists for lung issues. We go see all of these specialists because obviously the intricacies and the complexities of each organ systems do require someone who maybe has specific, more detailed, more in-depth knowledge of the organ system itself, right? I'm not arguing that. However, I think that this then also promotes the assumption that they are inherently separate, that they are operating in isolation. Now, I might be the only person that saw it this way, but I think there isn't enough conversation and exploration of the body with a greater focus on how each system impacts the other. Because I think too many of us have been in positions where, we've seen our primary care doctor and they maybe referred us to a specialist. And then you'd go see the specialist. But then as soon as it stepped outside of maybe their specialty, understandably so, they're referring you to another doctor, to another type of specialist. And then you're kind of in this constant disconnected, okay, that's where I have to draw the line because I don't have information about that organ system, or, I'm not qualified to speak on X, Y, or Z. So then you move on to the next specialist, and you're in this kind of cycle where it's so fragmented, and we really need to start looking at everything in terms of its connection. And I speak on this more specifically as it relates to our gut health, which I mentioned before, and our brain health, but especially, and this is coming from my own journey, the connection between your liver, your gut, your hormones, your thyroid and your gut health and your brain health. I mean, all of these organ systems and how they operate, we are all connected. Our whole body is connected to itself, right? So it's almost obvious the body needs to be viewed at in this way. And I think we've taken a really isolated approach when it comes to the body and our health, just based on the way our medical system operates. And I think the second that we're able to really kind of make connections, not only can we get more to a root cause, because you think about, say for example, there's digestive inflammation going on, and you're having symptoms that manifest in the brain, right? You have brain fog, poor concentration, whatever the case is. If we're specifically looking at our symptoms as it relates to what's going on in the brain, and we're not considering what's also going on in other areas, we're never actually going to heal. We're never going to actually get to the root cause or the underlying issue, the underlying imbalance or dysfunction or overgrowth or whatever the case is. Now, this is a very simplistic example, but it's kind of like we have to retrace our steps, because over time, symptoms can appear in a number of different ways. Symptoms are really, inflammation inside the body, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's where it originates. And I think that that is a really hard concept for us to grasp in Western healthcare, is the sense that, just because something's going on with my thyroid doesn't mean that that's where the issue originated. Did it originate elsewhere? Or is there's dysfunction or something going on elsewhere that's then manifesting as this issue? Mark Hyman, and I've shared this before, he says, all disease is really just inflammation. And so it's just a matter of where that inflammation is manifesting, that we notice it as disease, and then we're treating it as so, but we're not actually getting to where is this inflammation coming from. And it can really stem from a number of different areas in the body that maybe don't have anything to do with the symptoms that we're experiencing, if that makes sense. So this is so important that we start to really dig a little deeper. Now, obviously, this now includes a little bit more work, a little bit more effort, right? Because we have to really put on our investigative goggles and say, all right, what's going on here? What testing do I need to do? What blood work do I need? And so forth. And I think that, at the end of the day, while this might feel more cumbersome, this might feel more daunting, it is, in my personal opinion, the most effective, most productive way of getting to the bottom of things and feeling better, because we're looking at the whole body as opposed to, let me just narrow in on these symptoms and treat the symptoms themselves, because you know how that works, right? Treating the symptoms and not getting to the root just perpetuates the symptoms. It likely perpetuates the issue and probably snowballs and can become much worse. So now, lastly, I want to kind of tie it all together. I mentioned this briefly in a few of the other lessons, but bottom line here, one of the best things that you can start doing for the sake of your health, mind and body health, and a better quality of life is to listen to your body. I wish I had done that. What is my body trying to tell me? What is it trying to communicate with me? Now, this takes extreme awareness. You could say, okay, it's telling me X, Y, and Z, but what does that even mean? But at the very least, you can better articulate, better understand it, how your body is asking for help, how your body is, signaling to you, communicating with you that there is something wrong. And then through that understanding, you can start to, by process of elimination, pull away the layers of what could this signify? What is this a manifestation of? Because I think what's challenging is the fact that it is a little bit more complicated than just saying, okay, this symptom means this cause. I just don't think it's always so clear cut. I think a lot of times there has to be maybe like a couple different types of symptoms that you can say, yeah, okay, it sounds like it's in a little bit more alignment with hypothyroid or, leaky gut or whatever the case is. But even then, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of nuance based on someone's specific circumstances. It can be a multitude of different things. I don't want to oversimplify it by saying that it is so black and white. And I never want to come across that way because I know it can be much more complicated. And I know in my experience, even if I had known, okay, let me listen to my body, let me tune in, I wouldn't have been able to immediately pinpoint what was going on. I think it's safe to assume that the average American doesn't have this information to just intuitively know, oh, okay, it must be this, it must be that. So it does come with a little bit more nuance and more complexity. However, the first step is acknowledging that you don't feel right. And they don't always have to be blatant symptoms. They don't always have to be these, really intense, really severe symptoms in order for them to be justified. And I think that that's where we have it wrong, because we've normalized these subclinical symptoms of the brain fog, the fatigue, the difficulty concentrating, that just general maybe lethargy or irritability or whatever the case is. And we've kind of just accepted them as just being part of life, right? Just being part of how I feel. This is just how I am. I don't sleep well. That's just the way it is. Or I have trouble getting up in the morning. That's just the way I am. Or I am typically, on the more lower mood side of things, whatever it is, right? Whatever the case is, we've normalized these things, and we really have to be willing to look at them, accept them, know that they are real for us, know that they are, they are symptoms, identify them as so, and then use that as a roadmap to then say, all right, where do I start? Start looking at your own lifestyle, start looking at your own practices, do research, understand your history, look at your gut. That's what I said, to kind of get started. That's one of the best places that you can start, and really go from there. Now, this process is obviously much more intensive, much more comprehensive, and can be a lot. So I do recommend that if you can, work with somebody who's qualified to support you in this journey. But the second that you're able to really tune into your body is the second that you are a step closer to your healing, because you are listening to what your body's trying to say. I shared yesterday or the other day on Instagram how we are always so at war with our bodies. We're so frustrated. We're so angry. We resent them for the symptoms that we experience. And if we just start to reframe that and start to look at it as, this is not my body's way of rebelling against me. This is not my body's way of making my life harder. Like, my body's not trying to do this. My body is trying to tell me, please do something. Something's not right. There's an imbalance. There's a dysfunction. There's something going on. And so when you really start to look at it that way, you give your body a little bit more patience, a little bit more grace, a little bit more forgiveness to some extent, because it's really doing the best that it can in the environment that it's in. That's a quote that I'm probably going to mess up, but I love it. And it's essentially, the concept is, your body can heal as long as it's given the right environment. Our bodies have an innate ability to heal. So what it boils down to is the environment is off. What is going on around the body, inside the body, is off based on whatever reason, and it's up to us to do that work to understand, okay, how do I restore the balance? How do I restore the homeostasis? How do I get to the root cause? How do I find the dysfunction and go from there? So symptoms, I personally believe, are one of the first ways, because obviously you can't get inside your body unless you do extensive testing, and even then, that takes time, that takes money. So symptoms are a free way, which I know that probably sounds like, Emily, like, I don't want to have symptoms. I don't want to feel this way. Yeah, I get it. I totally understand. Me neither. But thank God that we have them. Thank God that we have them, because it gives us a way to understand what needs to happen. That, I think, is the most frightening part, right? Is the fact that there are a lot of things that are going on in the body that don't produce symptoms, and we don't see them until it's progressed. Till it's gotten to a point where too much havoc has taken place, or the disease has progressed to a certain point. I mean, Alzheimer's disease and dementia, neurodegenerative issues can present, symptoms 10 to 15 years after the onset of the disease has even taken place. So we're looking at years and years, even decades beyond. That's when we start to see symptoms. And I'd imagine that's obviously part of the reason why it's so hard to treat, because the disease has developed so much already, has progressed so far, that damage has been done, and it's obviously it's harder to address something when it's progressed, it's advanced so far. So you might hate me for saying this, but I think we can really practice gratitude for the symptoms that we have, because they are opportunities for us to understand what's going on and to prevent something from progressing and, to really feel better is to better familiarize yourself with how your body's letting you know that something's not right. So that is something else I want you to do, is just practice some gratitude for your symptoms. Instead of being at war with your body, feeling frustrated by your body, resenting your body, be grateful that it has a communication system like this through symptoms for us to understand, okay, this is my body's way of telling me that something's not right, that something's off. Now, what am I going to do about it? That is one of the most important lessons that you can take away. And I hope, and I empower you to do just that. So this wraps up my, if I could go back and start my wellness journey again, I'd ... episode. And I hope that my experience brings you value, brings you direction. I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to start a podcast, was because of the fact that through my time on social media, I haven't really gotten the opportunity. I mean, maybe I just haven't allowed the opportunity to share more vulnerably about my experience, I guess. And I know I did a lot of that through my first few episodes, but now as I move along, as I continue to podcast, I really want to bring more of that into what I'm sharing. Now, it's important that I'm also sharing on specific topics. It's important that I'm interviewing guests, and I'm so excited for this year because there's going to be so much value and so many conversations that I'm personally just looking forward to, but I hope that you are too. But also, from my experience, I can impart so much encouragement and so much, empowerment in someone who's just maybe getting started, or someone who is feeling overwhelmed, just based on the fact that I went through a lot in order to come out on the other side and look back and say, wow, interesting, right? And I have these lessons now that I can share with you. So let me just go through them real quick one more time. We need to recognize and accept that it is ongoing. Our wellness journey never ends. There's no destination. Yes, we can be focusing on specific concerns. For me specifically, I'm working on certain things right now, but ultimately the mind-body wellness journey is eternal. And we're going to encounter different things in life through different seasons of life, decades of life, that require different support, highs, lows, ebbs, flows, all of that. But being willing to say, yes, I know that this is forever, really steps away from that diet mentality. And I personally believe it gives us a little bit more grace, flexibility, less pressure, because we take it a day at a time. And we know this is a day-to-day commitment, and every day is going to look different. The investment's going to look differently, but I have to be patient with myself because it's ongoing, and it's because I care for myself. I want to feel my best. And, knowing that you have forever steps away from, I think, what typically we think of as, oh, I have 8 weeks to lose X amount of pounds, or whatever the case is, which can be really stressful, really restrictive, and it can cause some toxicity. So your wellness journey is forever. Secondly, prioritize your gut health. That's all I want to say. Your gut health is the key to health, my friends. Okay, you gotta focus on your gut health. If you want more on gut health, I will happily, and I plan to, even if you don't want more on gut health, I'm going to be giving you more on gut health, okay? Because you need to know this. This is so important. So stay tuned. There's going to be lots of episodes to come focused specifically on gut health, but then also you'll hear me talk about gut health probably in every episode. So get used to hearing it. Thirdly, let's question our healthcare system, all right? Let's be willing to do our own research. Be willing to be your own doctor in your body. You are your best own doctor. You know your body best. So be willing to question. Be willing to say, is there another way? Could I go about this differently? Is my blood work really that normal, right? Are these symptoms normal? Is this supposed to be happening? Is there another way, right? Is there another way? Question, 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 and always self-advocate. Fourthly, acknowledge that nothing in the body happens in isolation. Health is connected. We have a whole entire body that is entirely connected. So really understanding how one system impacts the other, how communication works, how, say for example, just our digestive system or our detox pathways, how many, roles there are in those processes, I think really gives you a glimpse of, oh my God, like what a team, right? My organ systems are such a team. And if one is malfunctioning, there's likely going to be dysfunction that in this downstream experience, that's going to then impact another system, right? So really understanding how our body's connected, so important. And lastly, listen to your body. Listen to your body. What is it trying to tell me? Symptoms are our body's way of communicating with us. And I said through the episode, we can practice gratitude for our symptoms, as wild as that might sound, because I know we get frustrated and they can be really, really challenging to navigate, to deal with, to live with. But if we start to reframe the way we see it and we start to make friends with them, essentially, to an extent, right? And say, all right, what is my body telling me through these symptoms? We can actually head down a path that brings us closer to healing, as opposed to, let me quiet these symptoms, let me put a Band-Aid on them so that I can just get by. Let's look underneath the surface, let's look a little bit closer, and then move forward from there. So I hope, like I said, that this brought you value. I hope from my experience, you continue to take away perspective and insight that you can integrate into your own introspection, into your own wellness journey. And I'm always here to explore this further with anyone. If you have questions or something resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you, whether it's over email. You can see my email. It is in the show notes, or DM me on Instagram. However you can get in touch with me. If something resonated or you have questions, you want me to clarify on something, please feel free to reach out. I want to be able to support you as best I can. This is obviously all driven by my own experience. So take what you want, leave what you don't want. But I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for listening. And in the meantime, be well.